going on, vinyl community? Welcome to another video with the Record Spinner. In today's video, I'm going to be showcasing 5 one-album wonders from my vinyl collection. Now, everyone knows the term one-hit wonder, which classifies an artist for having one song that provided their momentary success that overshadows everything else that they've done. But I started to think about all the bands out there that existed for a brief period of time and just managed to put out one album as their sole musical statement to the world. Plus, I think the phrase one album wonder lends itself to the fact that these artists, with the exception of a few, are relatively under the radar, so perhaps digging into that sort of realm can turn people onto some fresh music that has existed for so long but never thought to encounter. So I took a look at my collection and I realized that I had a sizable selection of albums that fit that mold, and for this video I narrowed it down to 5 albums that make up the selection that I'll be showcasing in this video. I've done enough talking, so enough of the chit chat. Let's jump into what this video is all about. First up is Power of Zeus, The Gospel According to Zeus. This was a band that came out of Detroit, Michigan in the late 60s and were signed to the label Rare Earth, which was a subsidiary label of Motown, which specialized in putting out psychedelic and underground rock. And also, funny enough, the band Rare Earth was signed to the label, so a bit of a coincidence there. But anyways, the lore goes is that Rare Earth didn't really market the band properly, and the resulting album that came out in 1970 fell into obscurity and the band sort of dissipated. And it's a real shame because this is a solid piece of hard rock and proto metal that doesn't quite have the heaviness of a band like Black Sabbath, but it comes across as a bit of an edgier Led Zeppelin. Now, given the rarity value of the album, original pressings can sell for anywhere between $100 to $300, so it's certainly coveted by big-time collectors. Abbey Road did a half-speed cut of it, which is a very royal treatment to be given for such an obscure yet solid album. And even though this sort of went past many ears of hard rock fans back in the day, their work has been sampled by rappers such as Eminem, Jay-Z, and Kanye West. So it's cool that Power of Zeus's work is being subjected to a fan base that is, and I say this with all due respect, oblivious to the power that this band provides, and it makes for some great explorative listening. Next up is Margot Guryan, Take a Picture. Margot was a songwriter who had signed with various publishers and labels such as Atlantic and Columbia, and was writing songs for artists as early as the late 1950s. She went on to work with jazz giants such as Ornette Coleman and had songs that were hits for acts such as Bobby Sherman, Spanky and the Gang, and a slew of others. She had signed with Bell Records in 1968 and set out to do her own album of the various songs that other people had done, such as Sunday Morning, Can You Tell, and Don't Go Away, as well as a bunch of other original material. And this is a fantastic piece of Baroque pop and sunshine pop with jazz-tinged pop melodies and musical arrangements done by John Simon and John Hill, almost akin to what Brian Wilson was doing with an album like Pet Sounds at the time, which Margot was a huge fan of. And what's interesting in retrospect is that Margot always insisted that she was primarily a songwriter, and she had to more or less find her voice, but the way they come across on this record is so nice and airy, almost serving as a precursor to what many dream pop acts would do in current years. Many critics adored Take a Picture and saw the album's overall commercial sound as a means to draw decent sales, but Margot refused to tour for it, so as a result, Bell Records refused to promote it, and the album didn't make much of an impact. So then she went on to continue writing as well as producing, and she became a piano teacher as well, and she unfortunately passed away in 2021. Just like Power of Zeus, vinyl copies of this album fetch hefty prices in the hundreds range, along with the even more rare promo version, which has a mono mix, but various labels have reissued these albums, and they are easy access. But outside of this album, there's also a collection called 29 Demos, which brings together demos recorded in the 60s all the way up until the 90s. But if you focus in on her period of activity as a performer, Take a Picture is all that exists, and it is a much appreciated album by music lovers. Next up is Public Nuisance, Gotta Survive. This is an album that I've talked about several times on my channel, so forgive me for rehashing this one. Public Nuisance was a band out of Sacramento, California, who first emerged as the Jaguars in 1964. Then they became Moss and the Rocks and cut a few 7-inches, and then finally rechristened themselves as Public Nuisance. Dirtied up their image a bit by delivering a unique blend of psychedelic garage rock and sort of proto-punk, so very much in the vein of The Who, Small Faces, and the Stooges. In late 1968, they signed to Equinox Productions, which was Terry Melcher's production company, and had cut roughly 2 albums worth of material over a period of several months. Now, at the time, Melcher had lived on 150 Cielo Drive in Los Angeles, and when he moved out, the house was then leased to Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski, and then the Manson murders happened, and amidst all of that, Melcher went into hiding and he dropped all the projects that he was working on, Public Nuisance being one of them. Now, all of the various recordings the band did were released in 2002 by Frantic Records, and that went out of print. Flash forward to 2012, Jack White's Third Man Records got a hold of the masters, whipped up some fresh artwork based on old photos, and released it, and that's how I discovered it. And if you can dig anything that can be found on the Nuggets compilations, you will absolutely love this album. But fun fact about some of the personnel in this band. The main guitarist, David Houston, founded Moon Records in Sacramento, and drummer Ron McMaster went on to be a renowned mastering engineer for Capitol Studios. And when Third Man released this album, Ron actually mastered the vinyl pressing for it. Next up is Dennis Wilson, Pacific Ocean Blue. Dennis, of course, was the drummer of the Beach Boys and the member that sort of embodied the whole California myth the band had written and sung about. His talents really started to be utilized more in the late 60s when his singer-songwriter sensibilities really kicked in, and his material was featured prominently on Beach Boys albums with tracks such as Little Bird, Slip On Through, Forever, and infamously Never Learn Not to Love, which was nicked from Charles Manson Cease to Exist. I won't go too in-depth into the whole Beach Boys Manson connections. A bulk of material that he had worked up during the early 70s had been left off of Beach Boys albums due to how contemporary they sounded compared to what the others contributed. Plus, Dennis purposely left them off for a solo album, which ultimately didn't happen early on. Flash forward to around the mid-70s, the Beach Boys were riding a wave of nostalgia-infused success, but there was also a lot of turmoil going on within the group, so Dennis kind of distanced himself from all of that and started to record material at their own studio, which was Brothers Studios, and the end result was this album. Now, Dennis's lifestyle was catching up to him, so his vocals have become a bit more rough and grainy, but they still come across as soulful. And the songs on this record, such as River Song and You and I, are almost spiritual, and they evoke the love and passion Dennis had for his craft. And while the album didn't really sell too well, it did outperform some of the recent Beach Boys albums that had come out at the time. Now, there were plans to do a follow-up album called Bamboo, but Dennis's death in 1983 left the album unfinished, so Pacific Ocean Blue is the focal point of Dennis's legacy and is considered to be, this day, a classic album. Last but not least, I'm going to infuse some modern blood in this video since all the other albums that I've talked about have come from the 60s and 70s, but I also chose Grandparents, Sincerely Bagman. Grandparents were a psych pop band out of Portland, Oregon that worked together for a number of years since the early 2010s, performing tons of local shows and self-releasing some singles and cassettes. They landed a deal with Strange Light Records and did this album, which came out in late 2015, which has some great psychedelic-infused folk, indie rock, melodic pop sensibilities. It makes for a great summer driving with a top-down type of album. But what's crazy is that literally just a couple months after this album came out, the band had ceased to exist. And just to tie it all in with one of my favorite modern bands, one of the members, Sonny Ferris, which is this member here, went on to form the band Blackwater Holy Light, which I've talked about plenty of times on the channel, and I actually had a chance to interview Sonny for the website VW Music. And upon hearing about her involvement in this band, it provided the incentive to check out this album, which in general is always a great way to dive into unfamiliar artists based on the involvement of others. But if you haven't listened to this album, seek it out for yourself it's absolutely solid. So there you guys go. That is my showcase of 5 one-album wonders from my vinyl collection. Of course, a video covering this concept is the first of its kind for the channel. And if this is an idea that you enjoyed, let me know down in the comment section if you would like to see a follow-up video. And if you enjoyed it, please go ahead, give it a like, and subscribe to the channel. See you guys in the next video. And most importantly, keep the records spinning.